The rain pattered softly against the transparent ceiling of Elder's Haven, a quiet hum that had become background noise to Ronan Vance over the years. He sat in the corner of the common area, staring through the glass walls that overlooked the bioluminescent gardens. The faint glow of alien flora cast an eerie but beautiful light across the courtyard, a constant reminder that Earth was no longer just humanity's domain. 5 years had passed since the Xylotheans arrived, bringing with them wonders beyond human comprehension. At first, their arrival had sent ripples of fear through the world, but as time passed, alliances formed and coexistence, however uneasy, became reality. Ronan had never expected to work so closely with them. His expertise had once been in engineering, but when the Xylotheans began integrating into human society, his skills proved invaluable. He had been recruited as a liaison, tasked with ensuring smooth communication between both species in various fields of study and diplomacy. It was demanding work, but the strangeness of it had become his normal. The facility was one of the few places where both species could interact freely, a space dedicated to collaboration. But even here, barriers remained. And then there was her, Velithara. She was unlike any Xylothean he had ever met. While most of her kind carried themselves with an air of composed detachment, Velithara possessed an almost unsettling curiosity about humanity. She observed, she listened, and she asked questions most of her kind would never consider. It made her a fascinating conversationalist, and an anomaly among her people. Tonight, she was alone, seated on one of the long, curved benches near the garden entrance, her posture more relaxed than usual. Her deep cerulean skin shimmered faintly under the low light, the intricate silver patterns running along her arms and legs pulsating slowly, a sign of her body's natural energy flow. Normally, those markings were steady, controlled, but tonight they flickered unevenly. Something was wrong. Ronan hesitated before approaching. He had learned early on that Xylotheans were not always comfortable with human proximity. But Velithara had never shied away from him before, so he took a chance. "You okay?" he asked, keeping his voice low. For a moment, she didn't respond. Then, with a slow exhale, she lifted her gaze to him. Her silver eyes, large, luminous, and always holding some unreadable depth, studied him for a long moment before she spoke. "There is discomfort," she admitted, tilting her head slightly. "It is nothing of concern." He frowned, glancing at her posture. She was favoring one leg, the muscles in her calf visibly tense beneath her sleek attire. Xylotheans had long, powerful limbs, designed for agility and endurance, but they also had different biological quirks, some of which still remained a mystery to humans. "Discomfort how?" he asked, moving to sit beside her. Velithara flexed her foot slightly, the motion slow and deliberate. "A buildup of tension," she explained. "Our bodies regulate energy through physical movement. If we remain stationary for too long, the flow becomes restricted." It made sense in a way. He had read about their physiology before, how their patterns were not just decorative but functional, acting as conduits for their internal energy cycles. If that cycle was disrupted, it could lead to discomfort or even temporary weakness. "Sounds like a circulation issue," he mused. "Humans get that too, but it's more about blood flow." She glanced at him with mild curiosity. "And how do you remedy it?" Ronan shrugged. "A few ways. Movement helps. Stretching. Some people use compression gear. But one of the best methods is massage." Velithara's expression shifted slightly, her brows drawing together. "Massage. It's a technique where pressure is applied to the muscles to help release tension," he explained. "Humans have been doing it for centuries. It's common for injuries, stress relief, even just relaxation." She studied him for a moment longer before speaking again. "Would it be effective for my condition?" He hadn't expected her to consider it so quickly. "It might," he admitted, "but I've never tried it on a Xylothean before." She seemed to weigh the thought carefully before nodding. "I am willing to experience this." Ronan chuckled. "All right, let's see if this works." He gestured toward the cushioned seating area, and she adjusted her posture, extending her legs slightly. Up close, he could see the faint pulse of her markings more clearly. He hesitated before reaching out, unsure if their skin was as sensitive as a human's. "Tell me if anything feels uncomfortable," he said. She gave a small nod, watching him intently. Ronan started slow, pressing his thumbs gently into the curve of her calf. Her skin was smooth, unexpectedly warm, but beneath it was a firmness unlike anything he had encountered before. It wasn't muscle in the human sense, more like a tightly woven network of fibers that responded to touch in subtle ways. Velithara inhaled sharply. He immediately froze. "Too much." "No," she murmured. Her voice was softer than before. "It is unexpected." He resumed his motions, applying gentle pressure along the length of her calf, kneading carefully. The tension beneath his hands slowly began to ease, the flickering of her markings stabilizing. Velithara's posture changed subtly, her body leaning ever so slightly into the sensation. "I did not anticipate this reaction," she admitted. Ronan arched a brow. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "Physical touch among my people is not casual. It is an intimate act." He stilled for half a second before continuing, choosing his words carefully. "So, this means something?" Her silver gaze met his, unreadable but intense. It could. The weight of her words settled between them, unspoken yet heavy. He hadn't thought much about what this interaction might signify to her. Humans touched often, handshakes, casual pats on the back, even friendly embraces. But to Velithara, this was different. For the first time since meeting her, he felt the full gravity of their growing connection. Neither of them spoke for a while. The only sound was the steady rhythm of the rain and the faint hum of the facility's energy systems. After a few more minutes, Velithara exhaled deeply, her body relaxing completely. The discomfort is gone. Ronan let his hands rest at his sides, studying her carefully. "That's good." She nodded, but her gaze lingered on him, as if considering something deeper. "I understand now why humans value this practice," she said softly. Ronan chuckled. "It's nice, huh?" She tilted her head, lips curving ever so slightly. "Yes." Another silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but filled with something unspoken. Ronan wasn't sure what it was yet, but he could feel it, like a thread slowly weaving something new between them. As the rain continued to fall, he realized something. This moment, simple, quiet, yet charged with meaning, was the beginning of something neither of them had anticipated. And whatever it was, he wasn't sure he wanted it to end. "You said." The days after that night felt different, though neither of them openly acknowledged it. There was an unspoken shift in the air whenever Ronan and Velithara were near each other. Their conversations continued as before, discussions about the complexities of their respective cultures, the challenges of integration, and the philosophies that shaped their worlds. Yet, beneath it all, there was something more. A tension not of conflict but of awareness. A quiet gravity that pulled them toward each other in ways they had not anticipated. Velithara still sought him out in the evenings, their meetings drifting further away from mere diplomatic necessity. It was during one of these quiet encounters, as they walked through the gardens outside the facility, that she finally addressed it. "There is a word in your language," she said, her voice calm but thoughtful. "I have seen it used in various contexts, but its meaning seems layered." Ronan glanced at her, noting the way her silver markings shimmered faintly under the moonlight. "Which word?" "Desire." The way she spoke it sent a strange heat through his chest. He cleared his throat, forcing himself to focus on the question. "Yeah, it can mean a lot of things," he admitted. "Depends on the context." She stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "Then tell me." He hesitated. This was a conversation that could easily tread into dangerous territory. He could give her the simple definition, the need for something, the longing for it. But he suspected that wasn't what she was truly asking. "Desire is wanting something deeply," he said finally. "Not just needing it, but feeling it, sometimes so strongly it's hard to ignore." She studied him, her expression unreadable, though her gaze remained steady. "Then I believe I understand now." The way she said it made his heart thud a little harder. He wasn't sure if he was imagining the weight behind her words, but before he could ask, she turned away, resuming their walk as if nothing had happened. He followed, though his mind remained tangled in what she had just implied. Over the next few weeks, their interactions grew more frequent, and with them came moments that lingered just a little too long. Her fingers brushing against his when she handed him a datapad, the way her gaze would rest on him when she thought he wasn't looking, the occasional closeness of their bodies when they discussed something over a shared console. He wanted to believe he was reading too much into it. Xylotheans were not human, their mannerisms and expressions often difficult to interpret. But Velithara was different. She had always been different. And then it happened again. She had requested his presence in one of the private observation rooms, a quiet space where diplomats could retreat from the pressures of their duties. When he arrived, she was seated near the transparent wall that overlooked the city beyond the facility, her expression contemplative. "I have been thinking," she said without preamble. Ronan took a seat across from her. "That's usually dangerous." A faint smile tugged at her lips before she met his gaze. "You are the only human I have allowed to touch me in such a way." The statement sent a sharp jolt through him, though he managed to keep his expression neutral. "I figured as much." She tilted her head. "And I suspect you understand the significance of that." He exhaled slowly. "Yeah, I do." For a long moment, there was silence between them, charged with something that neither of them had the courage to name outright. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she reached out, her fingers grazing the back of his hand. It was the lightest of touches, but it sent fire through his skin. "In Xylothean culture," she murmured, "when we allow another to touch us in such a way, it is not meaningless." Ronan swallowed hard, turning his hand over so that their palms met, fingers slowly lacing together. "It's not meaningless to me either." Her gaze softened, the silver glow of her eyes reflecting something he had never seen in her before, something vulnerable. "Then what do we do now?" It was a question he had no easy answer for. Loving her was not the problem. The problem was everything else. There were rules, unspoken yet rigid. The alliance between their species was still fragile, the integration process filled with tensions that threatened to unravel at any moment. To cross the boundary between professional and personal, between human and Xylothean, was to invite scrutiny neither of them was prepared for. Yet, as he looked at her, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He didn't want to let go. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'm not willing to pretend this isn't real." Velithara nodded, as if she had expected that answer. Then, without another word, she shifted closer, pressing her forehead lightly against his. It was a gesture he recognized now, one of trust, of affection, of something deeper than words could convey. And so, despite the uncertainty, despite the risks, Ronan closed his eyes and let himself fall. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance between secrecy and discovery. Ronan and Velithara were careful, never too close in public, never lingering too long in each other's presence when others could see. But in the quiet corners of the facility, behind locked doors, and beneath the cover of midnight walks, their connection deepened. For Velithara, it was an entirely new experience. Xylotheans did not form attachments in the way humans did. They bonded through shared energy, their intricate bioluminescent patterns entwining in a process that was both physical and emotional. But with Ronan, it was different. She found herself drawn to him in ways that defied her understanding. His warmth, his touch, the way his voice settled inside her like a steady current. One evening, as they sat together in one of the more secluded observation chambers, Ronan traced a finger gently along the glowing lines on her arm. He had come to understand that these patterns were not just decoration. They pulsed in response to emotions, shifting with her state of mind. Right now, the glow was soft, slow, peaceful. "You never told me what these mean," he murmured. Velithara watched his movements, silver eyes half-lidded. "They are the external reflection of what is within. When we are at ease, they remain steady. When we are unsettled, They flicker. Ronan's thumb brushed against a particularly delicate swirl near her wrist. And when you're like this? Her gaze lifted to meet his, and the glow brightened ever so slightly. Then they mirror something deeper. His throat went dry. He had never considered himself a reckless man, but everything about Velithara made him want to abandon caution. He wanted to know what it would be like to hold her without restraint, to press his lips to hers and feel that glow beneath his hands. But she was the one who closed the distance. It wasn't a kiss, not exactly, not in the human sense. Instead, she lifted her hand, fingers tracing lightly over his jaw before resting against the side of his neck. A pulse of warmth radiated from her fingertips, seeping into his skin like a slow, consuming fire. His breath hitched. "What? This is how we connect," she murmured. A sharing of energy. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever known. It wasn't just touch. It was something deeper, something that thrummed beneath his skin and wrapped around his senses. He felt her presence, her emotions, her very essence pressing against his own. It was overwhelming and intoxicating. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer as the warmth between them deepened. Her patterns pulsed in tandem with his heartbeat, as if syncing to his rhythm. It was unlike any human intimacy. Deeper, more consuming, a merging of something beyond the physical. When she finally pulled back, her breathing was unsteady. "I should not have done that," she whispered. Ronan still felt the lingering warmth on his skin, his mind spinning. "Why?" She looked away. "Because it is not simple. To connect in this way is to acknowledge something greater than mere curiosity." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Velithara, I think we passed curiosity a long time ago." She was silent for a long moment before she nodded. "Yes, we did." For a time, they sat there, the weight of what had just happened settling between them. Ronan reached for her hand again, intertwining their fingers. He didn't care about the risks. He didn't care about the questions or the consequences. He cared about her. And as Velithara squeezed his hand in return, he knew, whatever came next, they would face it together. "You said," the inevitability of discovery loomed over them like a gathering storm. No matter how careful they were, how well they hid their connection from prying eyes, the truth had a way of surfacing. It happened on a quiet evening, much like the one where it had all begun. Ronan and Velithara had retreated to the outer edge of the facility gardens, where human and Xylothean flora intertwined under artificial starlight. They had grown bolder in these stolen moments, trusting in the silence and shadows to keep them safe. But on this night, their luck ran out. A sharp voice shattered the stillness. "Explain this." Ronan turned first, instinctively stepping in front of Velithara. Standing a few meters away was Commander Drenhal, one of the lead Xylothean envoys, his luminous markings flaring with agitation. Behind him, a human officer, Major Calloway, regarded them with cold calculation. Velithara slowly stepped forward, her posture composed but tense. "This is not what it appears to be." Drenhal's silver eyes narrowed. "Then explain what it is." Ronan felt the weight of the moment pressing down on them. He could lie. He could feign ignorance, claim it was nothing. But that would be a betrayal of everything they had built together. He met Velithara's gaze, and in that single look he knew he would not run from this. "It's exactly what it appears to be," he said. "I love her." Silence fell over the garden. Even the distant hum of the facility's energy systems seemed muted. Drenhal's markings flickered rapidly, a sign of deep unrest. "This is unacceptable." Velithara's expression remained unreadable, but her fingers curled into fists at her sides. "By whose decree?" she asked softly. Calloway crossed his arms. "It's not about rules, Velithara. It's about stability. The alliance is fragile. Relationships like this complicate things." Ronan's jaw tightened. "And what if we don't care about politics? What if this is about more than just our species?" Drenhal exhaled sharply. "You don't understand the consequences, human." He turned to Velithara, his tone softer but no less firm. You jeopardize more than yourself with this choice. Velithara straightened, her markings glowing with quiet defiance. I am aware, and I stand by it. Ronan had never seen a Xylothean disobey a direct order from one of their own before. The tension in the air was suffocating, but Velithara did not waver. She had made her choice, and Ronan would stand beside her no matter the cost. Drenhel's expression darkened, but after a long moment, he exhaled, something unreadable flickering in his gaze. You will face scrutiny, he warned. From both sides. Velithara inclined her head. I know, Calloway sighed, rubbing his temples. This is above our pay grade, he muttered. It'll go up the chain. He looked between them, his expression unreadable. If you're both willing to fight for this, then prepare yourselves. It won't be easy. Ronan took Velithara's hand, lacing their fingers together in plain sight. Nothing worth it ever is. Drenhel and Calloway exchanged glances before stepping back. Then may your path be one of strength, Drenhel murmured, his tone carrying the weight of something almost like reluctant respect. For you will need it. And with that, they left. Ronan turned to Velithara, his heart pounding. Are you sure about this? She squeezed his hand gently, her bioluminescent patterns glowing steady and bright. I have never been more certain of anything. A slow smile tugged at his lips. Then let's face whatever comes. Together. She pressed her forehead to his, the warmth of her touch anchoring him. No more hiding, no more fear. Whatever the future held, they would meet it head-on. Side by side,